Hey y'all, picking right back up where we left off yesterday. The more I read it and the more I heard those words, it just excites me so. It resonates from that Charles Spurgeon sermon where he says that we would seek, that God would restore to us the faith of the men of old, that we might richly enjoy his grace as in the days of old. And a lot of times we don't think about grace having been experienced in the Old Testament, which is what these testimonies as prophecies is talking about, that we would experience his grace as in the days of old. We think of grace as a New Testament concept, which it is because of Jesus. But when you study grace out, which we have done in previous months, grace is an empowering. And so every time these testimonies of Israel came about, every time there was a miracle, every time God moved in their behalf, it was a only God moment. Those were empowering moments. They were moments and miracles that empowered Israel to do what they needed to do, to be who they needed to be. And so, yes, grace is a New Testament term, but it was experienced in the Old Testament. There was empowering in the Old Testament. And so those testimonies were meant to be lenses, right? That paradigm that we would think through. It says testimonies were the stories that were to become the lenses through which they could see their present challenge. And so the impossibility of what's set before them was to be viewed through the lens of the God over impossibility. And that with God, nothing is impossible. And so these testimonies were fundamental building blocks. This is what Bill Johnson says. Testimonies are fundamental building blocks of the awareness of who God is with us. They impart a conviction concerning his nature that must be displayed in and through us to the world. It's common for problems, stories of tragedies, and even gossip about other people's issues or failures to be shared at our dinner tables. What if we became more intentional in giving a testimony of something only God can do and get credit for it? Do you see the importance of keeping the testimonies and establishing them? See, verse 6 again says, for he established, verse 5, Psalm 78, verse 5, he established a testimony and express precept in Jacob, and appointed a law in Israel, commanding that they should make great facts of God's dealings with Israel known to their children. If we teach and tell our children about the greatness of God and about the greatness of his works, then they begin to set expectation to see that greatness. They begin to look at problems and issues through the eyes of David, like Goliath, instead of those 10 men who went to spy out the land who said, oh, we're as grasshoppers in our own sight and in theirs as well. See, David said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine who would dare come against the armies of the living God? But see, he knew God. He knew the testimonies. He had experienced and seen for himself. And I need to take those lens of the testimonies of who I've seen God be and what I've seen God do. And I need to put those lenses on right now in my own life and say, look what he's done. Look who he's been. He's never once let you down. You have never been forsaken. There's not one thing in your life that he has not been faithful on. And as I look at the impossibility of my circumstances through the lens of my God is God over impossibility, then it sets expectation for me to have the same kind of testimonies of his goodness and his faithfulness and his empowering grace as the men and women of old. You know, it says, Charles Spurgeon says that we might richly enjoy his grace as in the days of old, restore to us the faith of the men of old. But you know, if you go to Hebrews, you'll find Rahab and the greatness of her faith. I'm pretty sure. Let me be sure I'm not misspoken on that. Clearly I didn't have that in my notes, just in my mind. And that could be dangerous. But, let's see. Sarah. Yeah. Hebrews 11:31. Prompted by faith, Rahab, the prostitute, was not destroyed along with those who refused to believe and obey, because she had received the spies in peace. And remember, we talked about Rahab when we looked at Proverbs 31, that the Proverbs 31 woman does not fear when the snow comes, for her household are clothed in scarlet, are doubly clothed in scarlet. And we talked about that's how we even got onto all this, is the importance of teaching our children, the importance of being sure that our household knows our God. Tomorrow we'll be moving on in Proverbs 31. I'll see you then. Bye, y'all.